Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another day of webinars. It's Friday morning, it's almost weekends, but we've got a heavy topic today, and I'm very happy to be here together with Julian. Good morning, Julian. How are you?
Morning, Arno. Very well, thank you.
And Campbell, how are you today?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm doing great.
Yeah. And we got our guest speaker, Mike, today. Mike, how are you?
Doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Thank you so much. Mike, you're in London, right?
I am.
And Julian, you're in Palma?
Yeah, Palma, Mallorca. Yeah, sun shining, skies are blue.
I'm in Mallorca, and we're looking forward to the weekend because the beaches are ours because we don't have any tourists yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good, guys. What are we going to do today? And thank you everybody for joining in. Jesus, good morning. Nick, Steve, Jacqueline, and many others. We're all here, so I'm looking forward to seeing your questions in the chat. The chat is available, so please pop in all the questions so that we can make it a very engaging session. And I'll tell you something, I'll start introducing the people, and which means our guest speaker, Mike, is an interesting one. So he's able to answer a lot of questions that you might have from the inside. Let's see. So what are we doing today? We are hosting a webinar, obviously, and we are doing that together with Campbell, who's the Chief Security Officer of Pelion, and Julian, who's the Sales and Commercial Director of Pelion. And you'll tell a little more about yourself later, Julian, about the company, I guess. Been an ACRE member for quite a while. We did a great session last year in Asturias de Mallorca, and I hope this is going to be equally good. Our guest speaker, Mike Jones, also known as Stinger, is a ex-anonymous hack activist, which means that he is going to give you a lot of insights on, well, let me not tell too much because he's going to do all that, but he's got some great insight. He also joined us in Asturias last year, and I think for a lot of people in the audience, it was a huge eye-opener and a great asset to everything we did. Because and it's Joanna, myself, of course, and Joanna is on the other side, but has organized all of this. The only thing I do have to turn up and present this webinar. What are we going to do? We're going to talk about how easy it is to hack your yacht, how vulnerable your yacht really is, how yacht owners and their crew can better be protected, and IMO regulations for 2021. That's what we're talking about today. But without further ado, I'm going to give the stage to Julian. Julian, it's all yours. Please feel free to take it over. I'll start your presentation, and enjoy, guys, and make sure you put it in the chat. This video is going to be recorded for later viewing. So enjoy, have a wonderful Friday morning.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Arno. Appreciate that. And thanks again to Campbell and Mike for joining us on this webinar. And hopefully it's going to be very interesting and very engaging and informative. The main thing about this is really just to look at cybersecurity in a very kind of like general broad stroke, because there is no one solution that's going to fit everybody. And what we're looking to do is just keep you as informed as best as possible. What's been interesting over these last few weeks of isolation is just the way that communities have come together to help each other out as best as possible. And that's from the yachting industry and indeed the cybersecurity industry, because what we found is that with any kind of adverse situation, there's always opportunists, and the threat actors out there have been targeting unscrupulously, the NHS sectors, so people trying to help people in desperate need, and they're going in there hacking into NHS systems. And quite rightly, the cybersecurity industry said, you know what, you guys need to just truce back and just stop what you're doing. And we all came together and we offered our services, volunteered our services free of charge to many industries, just to say, look, we will try and help you as best as possible against these acts. And so, what we're trying to do for you guys on the yachts is just to forewarn you, keep you informed, and let you know what's going on. So let's look at how yacht owners and, let's look at how vulnerable a yacht is. Potentially very. Why? Because of the very nature. You've got ultra high net worth individual owners. You've got wealthy guests on charter yachts. You've got crew who potentially can be a vulnerability, contractors, how often do you kind of like, vet your contractors or scrutinize them, make sure they're not dropping in any sort of spyware or tampering with systems. One of the biggest things that we're seeing at the moment is the demands for bigger, better and faster communications, because with that you've got potential doors that can be left open when new installations have been put in. Basic simple things have the default passwords been changed. Social media is brilliant. Everyone needs to be connected when they're away from their loved ones, but just be mindful of the sort of stuff you're putting out on social media when you're in public access marinas. We're going to also touch on the Internet of Things, connected devices, just everywhere you look. You've got smart TVs, you've got your laptops, you've got Siri, you've got all these various things listening. They're all potentially ways in to invade your privacy, and this is what we're trying to kind of like steer you against. So what I'm going to do is just pass over to Campbell, and just he's been there and he's hacked into the yachts before, and just ask Campbell, what would you recommend as the best ways, the basic ways of things that yacht crews can like do just to kind of keep themselves safe against the cyber threat out there?
Yeah, for sure. You touched on a really important point there, where during this pandemic we got a lot of snake oil salespeople trying to say, yeah, we'll solve your problem by this magic box, or take this training course, or give us money and we'll threat hunt for you, and we'll be in the background looking at everything. The fact of the matter is, with security, with any kind of security, be it physical or cyber, it's just simple best practice and adherence to some really basic protocols that are effective, that will keep you safe. And actually having a drilled, well-versed crew and technical staff in the areas of basic security principles is the sorry, my dog has decided to join me, so a little bit distracting. Having a crew and staff, as well as guests who are well drilled in some of the basic principles of security, is really the best defense that we can actually instigate and insert into any kind of cultural community. And when we think about a yacht, we're looking at a crew, we're looking at an iodized system that is unique to itself, but also uniquely vulnerable in its own way. No two are the same, but the principles that we can instill and teach are the same for everybody. That they are as effective for every system, provided they're followed correctly and properly. However, as you touched on before, there's sort of like snake oil salespeople with their magic bullets and magic boxes are actually really detrimental to us getting that message out there. I mean, Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. To look at the way that we attack different organizations and
Mike?
Architecture, hackers always.
Oh no, have we got Mike?
I'm sorry. Yeah, can you hear me?
Mike is absolutely live, guys. Not to worry.
Oh,
okay. So, anyways, we look for the path of least resistance. So, even like your basic security fundamentals, if there's any kind of gap there, that'll be where we take advantage. I think there's a statistic out there that's like 90% of the breaches that occur are very simple attacks. They're not advanced attacks at all, like the 0 days that you see for some of the large tech companies that we've watched over the past couple of years. But yeah, I mean, as long as there's some sort of security awareness training, and a refresher course for that training, that'll up.
Okay, good. Just one second, I'm just interrupting. Julian, Mike is absolutely live. I can hear him. Campbell, you can hear him, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so it's
okay. I can hear everyone apart from Mike. Sorry.
No, Mike is absolutely fine. So go for it, guys. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. So yeah, I was just mentioning about security awareness. That type of training when people come on board is probably key to a secure environment. And just do the basics well. If there's one thing you can do, is do the basics well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump back in again around security awareness trainers. You know, I've taught it, I've seen it being taught, I've designed campaigns for many companies of many thousands of people. But where we fall down is we tell people, don't click the link, right? Don't open the file, don't stick the USB stick in. They're instructions, they're simple instructions, but our security awareness training to date has always been pretty childish in its approach, is teaching crews, teaching employees, teaching staff like they're fools. Here's a list of things. Don't do these things. And anybody on the webinar who's got kids will know that if you tell a child, don't do that, don't climb on the roof, all they hear is climb on the roof. The way we do awareness training is wrong. It has been forever. What we really need to instill is actual empowerment in people. So we look at, and we're going to talk about the IMO standards later, and I've got quite a lot to say about those because it's just the same thing that we were doing, 60, 70 years ago, but we've changed the language. So you've got processes and concepts like DDPRR, which is deter, detect, protect, react, recover. That's an old 1950s British military process for protecting paper documents. We actually teach people how to threat model, how to DDPRR, how to actually understand and think security, rather than give them a list of do's and don'ts. We're addressing directly we're empowering, we're giving people the tools to be able to assess and on the fly, when an email comes in, give them a mechanism whereby they can assess it themselves. And that's where the whole security awareness training piece falls down. Do's and don'ts don't work. They simply don't. And that's been proven. How many high level breaches have we had in the last 2 years where all of those corporates have had rigorous enforced security awareness training? But we're not giving people the actual tools to think about it themselves. And when we talk about cybersecurity, the snake oil salesmen do like to make it, we're the only people who can solve this problem. It's really hard. It's not. And we're selling crew, we're selling staff, we're selling everybody short by saying, this is you pay me lots of money because this is a really big problem to solve. The fact is, it is genuinely not. We need to just give people those mechanisms, those thought processes, those tools, which are pretty simple, really, and allow them to use them for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, just that's interesting. Again, Campbell, one of our engineers were on a yacht not so long ago, and a third-party company was installing a firewall, and his ending comments were, "We've installed the firewall. You're cyber secure now." And it was like, really? Can you say that? It's like, so you
That's
sure.
right.
Yes. Yeah, no, and so these are the things that you need to be aware of. And as I said, that there is no one solution that fits all. Every yacht, every vessel is individual, and it's not until you go on and you do a basic risk analysis to understand the potential vulnerabilities that you can start making the appropriate recommendations to kind of like level those guys up. And with the risk analysis, we always do crew training with it, because as you said, it's just highlighting those basic do's and don'ts, the points, just as simple as not plugging in and charging your mobile phones on the bridge. That's a massive kind of like route to disaster. Maybe Mike, from your point of view, I remember you saying that generally there's 3 ways that you would look at getting in a yacht. Was the internet connection, the satellite, and the Bluetooth. So from let's say a threat actor's point of view, you would be looking at all these potential areas of vulnerabilities. It's like people broadcasting Wi-Fi connections and then them not being segregated appropriately.
Yeah, I think with looking at the yacht architecture and operations, with targeting a yacht, it looks like, as far as VSAT goes, that is probably one of the spots that we would target the most. and with big payoffs, as far as big compromises and what the goal is, the intended outcome as far as, you know, financial theft or intellectual property, depends on how big the target is and how much time we're going to spend on that target. But the yachting industry is definitely a huge target when it comes to possible payouts for us.
Yeah. Yeah, huge target. If we're looking at super yachts, and obviously commercial yachting is a different prospect. It's a different threat surface, and there's a different payout. I mean, in terms of, you know, container ships, I want to know where the Ferrari is. You know, which container in that ship has got the Ferrari in it that's being moved from wherever to Canada, you know, so I can go and steal that container. With super yachts, it is a very different threat model. It's a very different attack surface as well, and it's really, the value there is not about the data, but more about the reputation. If I can get photos, intel about who's talking to who. So let's say theoretically we've got, and bear in mind I come from a spooky background, you know, I used to do this stuff for a living. I'm interested in who's talking to who.
Sure.
Why are they talking to them, and when are they talking to them? And I don't need to know much about the details of the conversation, but I really want just the metadata on when the call was made, who the call was made to, who was on the boat when the call was made. Gives, you know, foreign intelligence services a great deal of leverage in understanding what the conversation is. And if we just know who's talking to who when, we can pretty well infer and learn as much as we need to just from those simple bits of data. So whilst it seems fairly inaccurate that you know, someone's phone texted someone at 4 minutes past 9 in the morning, and that text was to someone in the Philippines, we can draw, you know, we can line up the dots. So cybersecurity in the environment of super yachting and yachting is very much about, not just about good practice, good hygiene. It is very much about actually understanding how the threat actors are using that data as well. Because it's really quite surprising when you start to look into it. And it's not a common thought train for people. Ships captains and ETOs can look at this and go, oh, so what does it matter? You know, they figured out, they took a photo of you making a phone call from the land, you know, whatever. It doesn't seem important. But if you use the information and you actually use it as an intelligence inference process, it's quite powerful stuff, and it's very revealing. So we have a different threat model and a different approach to securing communications on ships and trains and aeroplanes, for example. It's a whole world.
Yeah.
There's also
I can hear you fine, Campbell, so forgive me everyone, but I didn't get everything that Mike said. So if I'm kind of like repeating myself, then Campbell, you can probably tell me that yeah, that's already been answered. In terms of this, and again, let's throw this over to you. Most kind of like,
yeah, it looks like Julian is struggling a little bit with his Wi-Fi, Campbell. So maybe you want to step in there.
Yeah, sure. Let me see what I can do with the controls here.
Hey, Campbell, I had one thing to add while you're working on the controls. With what you just said about, you know, knowing your enemy, that's kind of my motto going through my career has always been, you know, in order to defend your network, you have to know who you're defending it against and become that person.
Yeah.
And, the threat modeling, you know, in cyberspace as well as on the physical, you know, theater and the battlefield, somewhat similar. It's very similar.
Yeah, it's very important, and I'll be honest with you. I've worked in cybersecurity for 26 years now. Started out in a very offensive field. I've been I've worked as a check team leader. I'm a check team leader assessor. Still very pen test focused, but also with that sort of length of experience, you see all sides of the industry. So I've worked with companies to do design and define their software secure development life cycles, their threat modeling processes, etc. And I teach them now as well. I have done for many years. And I'll tell you, to be perfectly honest, there is not a single company ever I've gone into to consult whether it be maritime, aerospace, automotive, financial, regardless of healthcare, regardless of the industry, or I've gone in to talk to the development teams, and they say, "Yeah, we do threat modeling. We know you don't need to. We don't need that. We know how to do that." I've never seen one single company who knows how to do it properly. Not one.
Yeah.
And when you actually show them the basis and the actual, the principles behind what threat modeling actually is, the light bulbs start going, "Oh, right, we've done this wrong for you." It's always that moment, and it's been 100%. So I've never seen it done properly. And understanding the threat actors, okay, I get it. Cybersecurity is a vast, expansive, and complex topic, but not everybody is able to put themselves in the mindset or the shoes of the attacker, and that's where we're quite gentle with people there. Our industry is terrible for mocking people, saying, "Oh, why didn't you understand that?" Which is a really horrible approach to take. Not everybody has the attacker mindset, but gaining some that it is exactly that, Mike. Putting yourself into the position of, if I was going to break into this, if I was going to steal this stuff, how would I do it? And being able to flip-flop between attack and defense. That's why there are cybersecurity professionals. Those of us who can think in that way. But it's a different skill. It's a nuanced and very fine-grained level of skills that obviously most people can gain some understanding of. When we're talking about security awareness, as I said before, teaching those basic drills like DDPRR, CIA, those kind of things, get people to just be able to run through those in their minds, pays huge dividends. I see we've got Julian.
Yeah, sorry, zoned out for a second there. I just picked up on what you were saying there, Campbell, about sometimes you can be a bit harsh on the people who protect the systems. And one of our beliefs when we kind of started back a few years ago was that the target market for us generally was around that kind of 50-meter yacht, because generally you found the captain and the engineer would look after the cybersecurity aspects of the vessel. On the bigger yachts, you would have maybe a second engineer, an ETO, and the ETOs would generally take care of that kind of stuff. The reality is, a sole engineer has got his engines to look after, his AC, maybe the ITAV stuff, and the toilets. So to start delving a little bit further and shoring up the cybersecurity side of things, kind of is a lot to kind of be putting onto them. And the captains have got maritime law, crew bureaucracy, management companies, the owners to kind of work with. And so you need that third party just to come in and just give them that element of reassurance, especially with the IMO regulations coming up, and say, yeah, we've looked at your systems and this is what you need to kind of do. And this is your vulnerability kind of points that we can help you with, or you go and get somebody else to kind of do it for you. But it's just having those, as you rightly said, the fresh professional eyes to look at it, unravel the potential vulnerabilities that you don't necessarily see, Yeah.
There's also, it's a double-edged sword when we're talking about compliance and regulations as well. And when the captains are hugely overburdened with responsibility, and maritime law is just, it's such a huge area. You cross a 12-mile dotted line and suddenly you're in a different area of law. It's captain's constantly aware. I know I'm a yacht master myself. Not commercial, not big stuff, but up to 20 meters. And even I have to sit down and go, what the shit am I doing? It's awful.
Sure. It's a lot of stuff.
I really do feel for them. But then we look at the opportunities around cybersecurity, where you've got the captain, you've got the ETOs, and they're looking after things, they're keeping us up. And this is service industry, especially around leisure yachting. It's a commercial industry. The crew are focused on keeping everybody happy, and you tend to get people attracted to the industry and are successful in the industry who are sharers, carers, and givers. All right, they're putting things out there, asking them to be introspective and rate every email they receive is a huge challenge. So the temptation there is for captains and ETOs to go, cybersecurity, go in here, right, I don't have to worry about that anymore. It's someone else's problem. Whereas it's not a destination, right? Cybersecurity is not somewhere you just arrive at being cyber secure. It's a process, and it's a process that involves every single individual. So the challenge, not just for shipping, but for every industry, has always been, financials are pretty good at this, has always been, how do you engage everybody? How do you give everybody some responsibility, some ownership around the cybersecurity responsibility? You know, it is everybody's a cybersecurity professional today. That's the bottom line of it. Doesn't matter whether you answer the phones or you make financial decisions. You're a cybersecurity professional. You have that responsibility. Everybody is a link in the chain.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and that's why when we do the crew training, we encourage everybody to be there, from the most senior ranks to the junior ranks, because, you know, even from a junior rank, picking up a USB stick and thinking, oh yeah, you know, that says bridge system, let's plug it in, boom, you don't know what's on it. And so, you know, we do go on to these best practices and the basics of like do's and don'ts. And the one thing without something like Boris Johnson is exercising a little bit of diligence, you know, and vigilance about things, and just be thoughtful and mindful. Just even on the social media, you know, what are you putting out there? Facebook, great for communications. LinkedIn, great for kind of like updating your CVs, but just be mindful on the stuff that's going on there, because that's all ammunition for a threat actor to gather intel and bide their time and just use it when it's appropriate. But yeah, Onno, any questions rolling in at the moment before we move on to the next topic?
Yes, I think like there's a comment that we that like, can we go into what it means for yachts, what they can do? And I think you got the slide up there. I think that's what people want to hear at a certain point. I think we have a good conversation about what's going on in the world, but I think it's good to get into the hands-on solutions, like what are we doing?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So, you know, we've been working very closely with the IMO and the ISPS to understand what these regulations mean. They have to be in place by January 2021, and they generally put out a big, broad kind of like sheet of recommendations. Those recommendations back in 2017 turned into something a little bit more kind of like critical because of the situations that were going on. There were more kind of like vulnerabilities going on out there. And then they said, well, okay, if you're in the commercial industry, you should speak to BIMCO. If you're in the yachting industry, you speak to this person. And they very much left it to them. So we've tried to kind of unravel the basics, which is the identification. So, you know, who are the people responsible for looking after the information, ships data, the systems, the protection, the risk control, detection, response and recovery. But if we look at these closely, every yacht, is going to be slightly different in their approach in the way they do things. So the people that if they haven't got a ship security officer, then who's going to actually take on that role? And that's what we were saying before earlier. There's an ultimate role, but there's also has to be a basic understanding from every level. On that point, would you agree, Campbell?
Yeah, it's, as I said before, you know, cybersecurity is everybody's a cybersecurity professional now. As simple as that, because as Mike well understands, it takes one flaw to fully compromise the system and move laterally around it. I always maintain, when I try to explain social engineering to people, as I say, if I'm going to try and break into an organization, I go for the salesperson. Because I can literally send you an executable malware file to a salesperson and say, please see the attached and let me know your costs or quote us on it. And there's no salesperson in the world who's not going to open it, because that's what they do. They have to make their number. So if you look at the motivations of the individuals around any organization, we're looking at crew on a yacht, their motivation is going to be to sell, to protect the image of the yacht, to be polite, charming, helpful at all time. So social engineering on a yacht, and social engineering any service industry, to be honest, is actually pretty trivial, as Mike will attest to. in terms of what we do and how we actually, and as the question was asked in the chat, is like, what can we do? To reiterate, everybody needs to start thinking a little bit more meta, or putting into place a process of refer and check around emails, around inquiries. There are a number of different ways. There is no, and I understand, the question in chat saying, well, how do we fix this? Well, every case is individual. It comes down to the people, getting them thinking in a cybersecurity manner, but the way that's implemented and processed will differ from yacht to yacht, depending on the philosophy, depending on the captain, depending on what the yacht actually does. There's no silver bullet around this at all. Mike, I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, one thing comes to mind. You were talking about the people, and we get into a bad habit in cybersecurity as an industry, looking and pointing fingers at where the failure came from, or after a phishing campaign, who do we have as a repeat offender? But I always tell people that instead of making people the weakest link or the problem in the cybersecurity equation, make them part of the solution. We found that the way that we approach people as a security department, it used to be when we'd come walking down the hall, you could hear the Star Wars theme music playing in the background. Nobody wanted to talk to cybersecurity. We were always there to shut something down. But what I found now is a different approach really helps a lot. And if you look at cybersecurity as an industry over the past 20, 30 years, I'll go as far as 30 years because, the life of the internet. But if you look back, we've been fighting this problem for 20 plus years, and we're still getting attacked with the same malware. We're still getting MS Blaster all over the internet. Things have not changed that much. Where I think the big gap is it's a people problem. It's not just a technical problem. Technical problems can be fixed quite easy. It's a people problem. It's a culture problem. Mm-hmm. But if you make the people on the staff and even the guests part of the solution and make them feel like they're contributing to it, it works better as a cohesive team.
Can I just jump in here? Guys, just like I'm listening, and I just want to use what you're saying is extremely valuable, Mike. But I think what we want to hear from the yachting community is we know that it's there. We know there's a cyber threat. We know we're probably not as protected as we should be. What do we need to do? What are the steps that we can implement today or tomorrow to make sure that we get there? I think that's the question. I think that's the answer that we're looking for from this webinar. And obviously, training is a big part of it, and you guys are experts. But what can we do now? I think that let's try to swift to that part of the topic.
Well, when you look at cybersecurity as a whole, and I'm sure Campbell can reflect this as well. When you're looking at, let's say, a yacht or a company, as much as you can reduce the footprint, better off you'll be. I've done pen tests where I've found Chromecast devices sitting on the public internet. It's all about knowing your architecture, knowing your environment, knowing your operations, and minimizing your footprint. Because that's the first thing as a hacker, that's one of the first things I do is look at, do reconnaissance and try to see everything that you have. And 9 times out of 10, I'll find stuff that you don't even know you have. And some of those devices have been sitting on the network for years. So that's a big key part is know your environment, know your operations, and be able to minimize that exposure.
So break that down, Mike, just in that kind of layman's terms. I think understanding the systems you got on board, how old are they? When were they last kind of updated and patched? The passwords, do they still have default passwords on there? We've come across vessels with bridge equipment over 10 years old, still with default passwords on it that have never been changed. So those basics of understanding equipment, like you rightly say, basic password changing, use a password manager. When we talk about passwords, we often talk about long and strong. So don't just put the yacht's name there and a 1, 2, 3. Just try and be a little bit kind of thoughtful about it, long and strong, or use a password manager. There's loads out there. that are free of charge, and they kind of like take that pain away from it, because you can have multiple passwords that you have in a password manager that will take care of that. So it's easy. And when we say long and strong, we often in training we use passphrases. So you could think of a song, yeah, and just string that song title all together. You know, I want to break free for the first time. If you string all that together using upper, lowercase, and a few kind of like digits in there, because I think I was talking with you guys before, and there's hacking dictionaries out there with literally millions of variations of passwords in there that they can just decipher literally millions in minutes, you know, and there's so much stuff out there. So it's just trying to be a little bit different, a little bit original, and the stronger it is, the less vulnerability and ability they've got to unlock that. And the other thing is the awareness training. The awareness training is just so important, of everybody just having a basic understanding of the do's and don'ts, because crew are changing, guests are coming on and off board, and quite often, and I've heard this so many times, is that, oh, well, we don't change the Wi-Fi password because if we have repeat guests, they don't like the inconvenience. Well, do you know what? I think they'd appreciate the inconvenience of not being kind of like, you know.
Nope.
Yes, but I've got some questions as well. There's the questions in the chat that are people asking about, is there a general frame? And I know you said no, but there must be something.
Yeah.
And any recommendations on what the basics are for crew members, or when to contact a third-party specialist?
It's a very, very important question, as particularly around third-party specialists. What we find in terms of incident response is a lot of people have disaster recovery, continuity plans around, okay, the engine room's on fire, we've got a plan. The transam's fallen off the back of the yacht, we've got a plan. In terms of incident response plans, we're good at these things, but we're not very good at doing them from a cybersecurity point of view, because we don't often understand or appreciate a cybersecurity event happens, you don't know there, right then, is it on fire, is it trivial? We have to triage, we have to think about, what is the correct action to take. So a very, very real world takeaway from this webinar that everybody on the ship can do is to look at their incident response plan around cyber and think about that. Part of that incident response should also be to include when to contact third parties. And without, spending, what have we got? We've got 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left. I could lecture you for a long time about how to design an incident response plan. But at the moment, when you bring on that third party is absolutely crucial. And third parties for any organization, and yachts being no different, when do you call PR to say, we've had a problem, we might have a bit of mud on our boots here, we need to sort it out. When do you call legal? And all of this is down to the appetite of the owners and the actual yacht itself. There's no hard rule, there's no one strategy that fits all, but the strategy that does fit everybody is make sure you have crew training, and then it's effective, it's not do and don't. A culture whereby it's all right to fail. And that's very important, because if a crew member clicks on a link or puts a photo on Instagram and goes, oh, damn, I shouldn't have done that, it should be absolutely okay for them to go to whoever and say, I messed up. You need to be aware of this. And those organizations where that is the culture, where that's acceptable, are far more resilient to long-term damage from any kind of cyber attacks.
Great. I've got some questions in the chat, guys, and I know that you got a slide with top tips. What would you like to do first, Julian? Go to the top tips and share them, and then go to the questions?
No, I'm going to go to the questions. I can see them coming up, and
okay.
One of them from Augustine. Is it necessary to change passwords most of the time?
Wow. Not wanting to steal the train here. There are very different philosophies on this depending on who you speak to. Now, even GCHQ in the UK have changed their advice on this last year. So the whole complex, above 8 characters, upper lowercase, special characters kind of things, very difficult for us to remember as humans. They're very, very easy for a computer to break. just because it looks complex and difficult for us doesn't mean it's complex and difficult for a high-powered processor. The best advice, and the advice that's now given by the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK, which is part of GCHQ, is that it's not about the complexity, it's about the length. So I can tell you, I'm going to break my passwords, they're all over 42 characters. Good luck.
Right.
They're not necessarily complex, but not very long.
But would you say like every 3 months, 6 months as an average?
That depends on the use of the password. So if it's a password that I enter in publicly, like the PIN number for my bank card, I have a higher risk. I need to change that more often because I'm exposing that in public. If it's something that's only done in the captain's cabin, no one's around, no one can see it, and it's typed in once every week, I'm not going to change that for years. But again, it's about this thinking about threat modeling, about the attack surface around every asset. And a password is not just a password, it's an asset. It's something that has use. So
it's a key.
How's it being attacked? Is it being observed? If it's a good long password and nobody sees it or knows it and it's never exposed, you only use it in one place, there's not really any need to change that on a regular basis. But my PIN number, as I go to the bank to get cash out, who knows who sees it? I'm going to show you my PIN number. Who knows how many people know my PIN number? I change that quite regularly for that reason. So again, it's a different set of thinking, a different set of processes around how we deal with our assets, and passwords are assets as well. We do think of them as being security, but really they are something that people want.
Yeah, makes sense. Neil's asked, do you have an example of an internet response? And again, for me, it depends. And when he says internet response, I'm assuming he means an actual cyber attack response.
Incident response, I think Neil meant there. Yeah, lots of examples. Mike's caused plenty of them. The problem with incidents is you've got to know it's happening in the first place.
Exactly.
To actually respond to it. And when you respond to it, the strategy will depend on the classification of the incident as well. So you've got a different response to a fire than you do to a different response to, the life raft's falling off the back of the boat, right? So it's a nuanced and complex process. But Mike, I'll let you jump in here, mate, about incident response, because you've been fighting them in the past and trying to get around them. So, mate, you.
Exactly. So I had the unique experience. I worked red team and threat intelligence for Bank of America back during Occupy Wall Street. And at the same time, I was a member of Anonymous feeding intelligence back to Anonymous regarding Bank of America. That was part of the legal issues I had. But so one thing I found with the companies that we targeted and individuals we targeted is humans are very predictable. And this goes back to changing passwords as well. As an organization, try not to be so predictable as far as every 30 days you change a password. Because I'm going to look at my calendar and go, oh, okay, I have a week left to crack Mr. CEO's password because I know they change it every 30 days. Try not to be predictable. As far as incident response, so traditionally we have red team and we have blue team. Red team tries to attack the network, get in. Blue team defends, obviously, but there's also another team called the purple team. Basically, we can sit there and while the red team blows up the network and the blue team tries to defend, we can monitor and take a look at how they react to certain situations from the point where they look at the IDS and see an actual alert come through and how they analyze that and how effective the group is at coming together and having that plan and that communication, that chain of custody. So, I mean, everybody could benefit from obviously a purple team exercise, but even internally, I know for my people, what I used to do is I used to run attacks on our network, live attacks. And I would take a look at the IDS and I'd watch our analysts and kind of help them guide them through how to approach each situation, how to isolate, how to take, a complete inventory of machines that are affected. But that also goes back to know your infrastructure. But if there's one thing you can take away, and this leads to about 99% of the breaches, don't be so predictable. Being predictable is a downfall of a lot of organizations.
Sure. No, thanks for that, Mike. And I hope that's kind of been useful for Neil, because like we said, there is no kind of like magic answer. That it all depends on scenarios and likes of. But yeah, happy to kind of like take that further. I just had one from Jesus. What do you think about create different scenarios like in firefighting drill to practice how response in the event of a threat detected? So yeah, are there different scenarios? It's going back to what you were saying, red team, blue team, purple team, analyze, and you can throw up whatever scenarios you want. And one of the things I think, Campbell, where you kind of like...
So, didn't get into the question there.
I'm sorry?
I got Campbell, and then you cut off. So I didn't.
All right, yeah. So, yeah, I was just going to elaborate a little and say, well, Campbell, when you took control of that yacht, when you hacked into it, you had control of CCTV, entrance system, and likes of. And from that, really, you could play around and do whatever you want. So you could send fire systems sort of whirling off. You could send CCTVs, cut them off, pretty much get on there, do what you want. So, you know, there's all sorts of things you can play around with.
Yeah, I mean the mistake there, and this was this story will follow me around forever. This is not the only yacht I've hacked, but this is the one that made it into the front page of the Guardian in 2017, because I spoke at the Super Yacht Investors Conference, I think it's called, in London, and sort of relayed the story. This was supposed to be a private group, but somehow a reporter had infiltrated. And this is really important. You know, this is just an example of cybersecurity, of any kind of security. A reporter had managed to get their way in to the conference. And so I'm blithely there, obviously not revealing names, locations, dates, names of yachts or anything, going, this mistake was made and that mistake was made. And I could start the engines and the thrusters could be, you know, set off and could wipe CC, you know, as a real world example of. And this again was a yacht that was being refurbished, and the network was being put in new in 2017 or 2016, I think it might have been. So it was a really good example. That story will follow me around forever, I'm sure now. But there's basic engineering principles there, where the people who are putting the network in had not designed it. They had designed it for uptime. They had designed it to satisfy a requirement, but there had been no security brief. Or if there had been a security brief, it had been woefully misunderstood by the installers. We were talking with Mike and Rick and Julian yesterday about the sort of the state of yachts at the moment. And we were laughing about firewalls, to be honest. Now, I will relay a real world story for you. About 12 years ago, I think it was, I was doing a penetration test on a government body in London. A London borough, in fact. A large London borough, I won't name it, but 8,000 employees, 500 or 600 IT staff. You know, this is a pretty big deal. And obviously, London boroughs have 3 to 5 million people living in them, so there's a lot of support staff there. The part of the Cabinet Office, the UK government, had delivered some new security requirement instructions, and one of those instructions was the application of paired firewalls. So you have redundancy. So instead of having one firewall, you have two. So if one goes down, you got another one as a backup. So it's resilience. It's also. So this particular borough spent £50,000, right? £50,000 on two top of the range firewalls. Absolute, you know, Rolls-Royce things. These are. I won't even name the manufacturer of the models because they're operational security, right? If I say that, you might be able to figure out who I'm talking about. They put these in, dual pair, line them up. Very, very proud of them. Got me in to make sure they were secure. To discover that they'd fulfilled the security brief and that they installed two firewalls, but they hadn't configured them to do anything. They were literally just pass-throughs. The rules were set to any in all directions. So any traffic of any protocol on any port could go in all directions. But they satisfied the compliance auditor because they'd installed two firewalls. Now that's a massive problem in security. In fulfilling the brief versus actually making something secure, Yeah, miles apart. So when you're looking at vendors, again, this is a supply chain challenge. When we look at vendors, say, yes, we will make it secure. What do they mean by that? Because everybody means something different by it's cyber secure or it has security. It's no real definition around it. So people like Mike and I are practitioners who break into stuff and who know how to defend against stuff. We've got a very, very different take on what security means. Whereas if you go to your vendors or you go to your average person out there with IT, they have a very, very different understanding of it, and it's quite scary, if I'm perfectly honest.
Good. Gentlemen, I'm coming in again because we got a few minutes left, and I got some more questions here. And I think we want to end with some tips that basically people can use today on their vessels. And I know there's a slide on that. Jesus is asking, is the weakest interface is the chair keyboard or the humans? Any guidelines to teach training for the basics for junior crew members? So you got some new crew members on board. What do you do with them?
Well, I'll chime in again. I know I've got a lot of opinions to share with any junior member. Again, it's about building that culture. And I'll reiterate what I said about it's okay to fail, but it's okay to understand you can fail and make mistakes. So with any junior members, if they aren't sure, make the culture acceptable for them to go and say, I'm not sure about this. Could somebody give me some advice? Should I click that?
Absolutely.
Let them learn from their mentors and create that environment. And that's the best advice I think I can give for any company, crew, wherever that is if they're not sure, it's okay to ask. And it's that culture of it's okay to fail and to be seen as, being able to fail. So if you don't ask, and again, competitive cultures where people are trying to climb up the ladders of getting the promotion, keeping their job, and they go, I don't want to ask that question because if I do, then maybe, they think I'm not as good as I might be. Cybersecurity is incredibly complex and really nuanced. Ask the questions, crowdsource the answer, create that culture. I still go to people like Mike and say, Mike, dude, what do you think? Am I right about this? Am I wrong? Right? And I've been doing this forever. Yeah. You got junior crew members, make that culture where they can go in and say, I know I had the training. I think it's this, but could you check it for me? And that
actually, that's a good point, Campbell. Because again, we're trying to kind of like get the STWC, the basic training, to incorporate a little bit of cybersecurity training because it has become such a huge topic. So from the ground roots, give them that basic understanding as well. You're absolutely right. Quick question here from Steve Thomas. Are there any that should be default blocked or block them all and only open what is proved to be needed?
You want me to take that one? The obvious ports, I mean, there's a list of protocols that are pretty weak protocols, like IRC, stuff like that. I would say unless you have some kind of critical operation that relies on IRC, don't have that open. And if you're using IRC, get with me offline. I could probably give you a solution to something a little bit more secure.
Okay.
But as far as ports go, I mean, I can get any type of service to run on random ports. It's more about knowing your operations and what needs to be opened at the firewall. By default, my policy is always deny by default.
Yeah.
And allow by exception.
Yeah.
And that goes for everything.
Yeah, there's actually, again, I bang on about military security principles all the time. I'm actually doing a talk at B-Sides Athens next month, which is about the history of security principles and how it applies to cyber. Because we talk about, you're probably familiar with the term dual factor authentication. Well, the first historically recorded example of that is 54 years before current era. We're doing the same thing we've been doing for thousands of years. When we talk about what ports should be open, there is a well-established and known mechanism called the principle of least privilege, or PULP. That is always your default go-to. If it doesn't need to be there, don't have it there. And that's the answer to the question from Steve there. Block them and only open what's absolutely needed. And make sure if it's needed, is it justified? And only have it open for as long as it's required. So if somebody needs access to DNS on port 53 for an hour, make sure it's shut down once that requirement's gone. And it's called the principle of least privilege. And it's one that it is a principle to live by, really, because it doesn't just apply to cybersecurity. It applies to literally everything in our lives. Only provide what's needed for the duration of time that it's needed. That's maybe a little bit overly philosophical, but if you think about security and access, the principle of least privilege is a really important concept.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that answer, guys. I see that Julian's popping in and out. He's back again.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Sorry, I keep getting thrown out. Are you going to go up to top tips?
Yes, let's end with top tips. There's a list of top tips here, and I'll put it out there and for you guys to run through to end this session.
Okay. Protect your data. Yeah. So once you kind of like got it in there, make sure you back it up as well. Backing up is an important part of it, because if you do have a breach and systems are wiped out, you need that reassurance to know, and it's all part of your recovery system, to know that you've got critical data backed up. Correct, Campbell, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And the backup is very important as well. That point you just touched on there. When we talk about incident,
am I still in?
plans, you can't respond to an incident if you
Am I
don't.
still there? Yeah. Avoid pop-ups. Unknown links, special offers. We've seen it all out there. The sort of like phishing campaigns. Are you with me?
Yes, we're with you. Just keep talking.
Yeah. So avoiding the pop-ups. If it looks too good to be true, please avoid it. We've touched on the passphrases, long and strong. As Campbell was saying, it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It's something you can remember that's long and strong, and the frequency of changing it depends on the amount of use that you're having. If you're using business credit cards, making transactions and likes of, try and do it in secure area networks. So, either on the vessel or somewhere that is secure, not just in your shopping precincts where you've got open public networks, which are massively vulnerable. And again, going back to, if it looks a little bit kind of like suspicious and fishy, it will stink and it'll sink. Social media, use it thoughtfully. Everybody needs a bit of social media out there. Fine, not a problem. Use that element of discretion and don't be sort of like posting sensitive data. I know most crew will go through the do's and don'ts on social media, but keep that in the back of your mind when you're posting stuff back home. Remote devices, just if you have an unconnected laptop, you can check a USB stick that, even if it's come from a reliable source, just check it in an unconnected laptop and just make sure it's clean and it's safe. Because once you start putting things into the bridge system, and as I say, even from charging mobile phones on a bridge system, massive no. Please do not do that. And it's generally the captain will take note of that. But if you've got somebody on watch, middle of the night, need to plug a phone in, don't do it. Remote, where are we? And yeah, that's pretty much the main crux of it. If anybody needs to ping us a message or ask any other questions now or later, feel free. Ono, do you want to just hit the last slide whilst we just wrap things up, please? Yeah. Everybody out there, many thanks for listening in, tuning in. Really appreciate that. Like I say, myself, the team are here. At the end of a phone or an email, just go onto our website, Pelion-Consulting.com, to ask Campbell, Mike, any other questions or concerns you may have. If there's any training needs or whatever, we're here to help and advise as best as possible. Just even picking up the phone and asking for a little bit of advice isn't going to cost you anything, but could give you that element of reassurance should you need that. Ono, thank you very much. Mike, Campbell, thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's been a fun morning.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Very interesting. I saw that like a bit of feedback is like we've got some great questions here, and there are more out there. But please reach out to the guys. They've just offered their free assistance for any direct questions that you want to ask. They are extremely knowledgeable. They take a lot from their corporate experience to the yachting. I think you should take advantage of that knowledge that's been offered. Thank you so much, all three of you. Everybody, thank you. Have a lovely afternoon. Have a great weekend. And we're back Monday afternoon for a COVID-19 update with Meda. And it was a bit of a pessimistic message we had from him a few weeks ago. So hopefully he's more optimistic on Monday. Again, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And
good weekend, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.